Hello, everybody. Today we're doing another book review. This is my project to read 100 of the what are considered the great books of literature. And I got this list, as I had mentioned in the last video, from the Oklahoma Library Association, and then I added and deleted some just to round off the list from the typical list that you would see on the internet, the best 100 or best 200 books of all time. So it's not inclusive. It's just books I decided I would like to read. Some of them I have read before, and some are brand new, like the one that I am looking over today, which is Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy, written in 1895. And so this was a new challenge, and I had never read anything by Mr. Hardy. And I did look a little bit into his background, and I went to this book pretty much blind. The main characters in the book are the protagonist is Jude Fawley. He is the protagonist, and he's a young man who has a dream of becoming a scholar, particularly a religious scholar, but he comes from a working class background, so that's is going to be his challenge. Another character was an important character is his first teacher named Mr. Philistine, and he is Jude's teacher, gives him a love for learning, encourages him, and then heads off to a city to also become a scholar, kind of to increase his education level, and Jude models himself after this. Another character is Arabella Dawn, who is an absolutely amazing character. She's despicable in a lot of ways, but she is absolutely hilarious. And she is a girl in the village where Jude is growing up, who is a daughter of a pig farmer. And definitely a little bit of symbolism there. And she and Jude get involved, and she is going to pop up like a bad penny, like the old saying, a bad penny always shows up. She will always show up to bring mayhem with her. The last two characters we want to talk about is Sue Bridehead, who is Jude's cousin, and they develop a relationship beyond just cousins. They develop a romantic relationship over time. It's greatly resisted by Sue. Jude is pushing for it. He's just headlong in love with her, and it's a very unusual, it's a push and pull relationship, like I said, but eventually they become living as a married couple. And finally, there's another character who comes in late into the story who's very important, is Little Father Time, who is the child of Jude and his first wife, Arabella Dawn, allegedly. This is, what she alleges, and it does seem that there's some reason for that, and she just kind of passes him on to Jude because it doesn't quite fit her plans. And he's a strange character who is kind of like a thermometer measuring outside instances and then becomes the thermostat and reacts to it. So just a brief summary, and I'm going to try better than I did last time to not have as many spoilers and to keep this also a bit shorter. Jude the Obscure is basically the story about a working class young man who dreams of becoming a scholar at a prestigious university, which is modeled on Oxford. It takes place within Victorian England in the late 19th century. He's going to meet a whole slew of barriers to his dream. They come from the financial reality that he's not a wealthy man. He has to work, so he has to do his studying on his own without a mentor, and he does quite well. He's very dedicated to it. And then real life, especially after he gets married and all that entails, and then the necessity to work does inhibit him from pursuing that dream and getting to a certain level so he can actually go to university. But the real obstacle is he's facing the dominant culture. And this is very much closing the doors of opportunity to him, and how basically society, wealth, station because of birth, really do create limits in Victorian England, and one may argue even today, to enter into the people who are the movers and shakers of the dominant culture and being excluded from it. There'll also be other things, views of traditional morality that are given very serious service when applied to certain people, particularly those who are not in the part of the dominant culture, and it's kind of used as a blame that this is what's keeping them down, certain personal behaviors. But again, it's really what's keeping them down is the wall that they face when they try to progress and basically increase their own efficacy. He shows great determination throughout it, but it's just not enough. He can't quite overcome these forces that are amassed against him, both in the wealth barrier, the power barrier, and not staying with traditional Victorian values with regard to his relationships, particularly with divorce and the remarriage. Beyond the fact that he is in a very intense relationship with his cousin, and again, you have to look at historical context. This was not at all something that was rare. This, look at the marriages of Victoria's children. Basically, they all married cousins. I'm not saying it's right, but this is basically not a typical, untypical behavior for the dominant culture. But when the people outside that culture do it, it's kind of looked down upon from a position of power. The book was not really well received by many in Victorian England due to its sexual content, the criticism of the hypocrisy within the dominant culture, including religious values that were very unforgiving and gave very strong recommendations against the lower classes and kind of blamed them for their own problem situation that were really created by other circumstances. Most importantly, the wealth of democratization in society. It was actually called Jude the Obscene, and it was again looked at as a negative way. Another aspect is the aspect of feminism that is found in Sue Bridehead. So this is the last novel that Mr. Hardy wrote, and again, it's just really resisted by the dominant class and by Victorian England in particular. I'm just going to touch on some major plot points and hopefully leave you with a desire to read this book. Basically, Jude, the major plot point is Jude has a dedication to a goal. Jude is a very sensitive young man. He's not hard. He's not hard scrabble like many in the lower classes are. He's insightful. He's intuitive, and he has a goal that is basically existential. That he wants to become something that he can't be, and a lot of people say he can't be, including having a happy marriage. Everyone throughout is saying he won't be able to have a happy marriage. So he commits himself to this goal, and he really applies himself. I mean, I'm a fairly well-learned person. I have a doctorate. I did apply myself very hard to my craft, but this guy has dedication that is way beyond mine. But I do remember many times waking up at like 5 o'clock in the morning before I was heading off to work, and working on my dissertation, working on coursework, and then oftentimes working till very late at night when I returned. Jude really is quite dedicated to this. He commits himself, but he's meeting these forces when he actually decides to head off to this university model in Oxford. He is looked upon like, what the heck are you doing here? You don't belong in this place. This is not your world. And it's locked to him because of his social stand, not his desires and nor his capabilities. He also has another goal, like an impossible dream that he can't get, and he wants to have Susan as be a part of his life, beyond the fact that they're cousins. The fact is she's rather cold toward him, not cold. She wants a relationship, but she doesn't want to have a sexual relationship or a romantic relationship. It's really have a romantic relationship because of the aspects of sexuality that would be, concurrent with that relationship. She is an avant-garde thinker. Jude is very traditional, even though he's going about something that's completely untraditional. So there's a little cognitive dissonance between him. But Susan is very forward-thinking. She's a feminist. She wants to be valued by herself and not just being objectified that she has to be a wife or be involved in a relationship, etc. Her nonconformity is causing conflict with Jude, who really, despite his nonconformist goal of breaching that gap between the social classes, he's very traditional in his outlook. One key factor of this book is going to be probably the most interesting character in some ways, Arabella Dunn, constantly showing up when things just maybe start having a look like maybe it's getting right. Because in this book, you're constantly going, good Lord, Jude, come on, either walk away from this or, make her commit. And same with her, either leave the guy and tell him no or make him good. But there's constantly this give and take and push. Well, whenever they finally make a decision that kind of moves the plot forward, up comes Arabella Dawn and her very, very loud, dominating the spot and hilarious in certain ways, but also very um, uncomfortable way of interrupting the scene. Arabella Dawn, who is not nearly as worthy of either the two protagonists, has found her niche, not in the middle class per se, but working toward that, and is very careful about protecting her place in that. So it's kind of the irony that this loathsome kind of vulgar person has arisen, and yet these two very erudite, enlightened people can't get a break because a bad penny always returns. Um, the book reaches a point of stasis with the protagonist. Jude has kind of accepted the idea that he's not going to be able to attain the education he wants, but he is well educated and it does offer some opportunities, but he just is not able to take them. He just can't follow through. The book is going, as I was reading the book, I'm going, okay, we're going along. It's kind of just in this stasis situation. It's static and it's moving, but not really forward. And it's kind of direct, backsliding a bit, regression. And then you reach the turning point. The turning point to me, I'm just going to tell you my experience with the turning point in this book. Because if you haven't figured out, if you're expecting a real happy ending, you probably haven't been listening very carefully. The turning point, when I read it, I looked at the text and I looked at, the book. I use a Kindle and I was looking at it and I just couldn't do anything. And after about 2 or 3 minutes, I said, I'm going to read this again to make sure I got it. I read it again and I said, okay, I think I got it. And because it's not that very difficult a passage to read. And I read it again the third time. And I just was like, I dropped the Kindle on my lap. And I just sat in silence, unable to look at the text, unable to do anything, just sat still on my chair, unable to move because of the turning point. And this is the exact reaction that I think is appropriate because it matches the reaction within this text itself. I'm not going to tell you the turning point. I hope that I've got you interested because it is a absolutely strong turning point. When I read this book at first, I liked it, but I didn't like it a lot. I liked it. I would say in an A to F scale, I give it a B plus or a B. And not that I'm saying the quality, just my reaction to it. As a month has gone by, I read this book a while. I like to sometimes let them digest a little bit and say, what did I really think? What did I learn? What do I get from it? This is one of the most phenomenal books I've ever read. Because I experienced what the characters experienced. And if you want a book that really challenges you, makes you look very succinctly at how the interactions of a dominant culture within society and how they impact people who can't break into it, who want to break into it, I think that you can really gain some value from this book. So I think I've done a little bit shorter today. I hope you guys watch this and like it. Subscribe, please. I'm just doing this for my own enjoyment. I don't expect a lot of people to follow it, but it always is nice if you can. So if you do read and you like, please like, subscribe, and I will hopefully be able to give these on a fairly regular basis. So that's all, and thank you very much for viewing.